I'll seek you out, flay you alive.
Pogo here, and welcome to the next episode of the Swing 101 mini-series. In this episode, I am going to show you guys, I guess, sort of the basics, although most of the stuff that you're probably ever going to really need to know about layout managers in Swing. So, the way that Swing works is you have a bunch of different containers, like for example the J-frame or a J-panel, which we haven't covered yet, but we will get there. And these containers can store and display the different objects like J-labels, J-buttons, but they also have a layout manager, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It tells the container how exactly it's supposed to lay everything out. So, and I think probably the first episode, or maybe the second one, I added this one line right here, and I said, don't worry about it, because we're going to get to it soon and explain it. And this is actually a layout manager. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a couple of different types of layout managers that you might possibly want to use. Now, the first thing that you would always do is it would be container.setLayout. This would work on a J-frame, which is what we're using here. It would also work on a J-panel as well. You know, any container which you know, displays a bunch of objects has the ability to be told how it is supposed to work. So let's just go through a couple of the layouts that are built in. Now, you can of course create your own layouts, but I've never had to do that, and it's not terribly important. I mean, the layouts that you're going to want to use already exist, and we'll go through them today. But if you guys are really interested, maybe farther in the future I could show you how to make your own layout managers. Not terribly important. The first layout manager, which is, it might not be the default now, but at one point it was the default layout manager, is called a flow layout. And if we go ahead and run this, you'll notice that a flow layout works a lot. It does exactly what it sounds like. It flows everything. So if this window will show up, then you'll see that everything flows across. And actually, if I go ahead and stretch this, then you'll notice that all of the objects will actually go into one line, because if I make it too small, then it will flow onto the next line. But big enough, everything will stay in one line, and it will go left to right. So that would be the flow layout, and you know, this is a fairly common layout that you would probably use for some of your different things. The next one I'll show you, I never use this layout, but a lot of people seem to like it. This is called a border layout, and the way that this works is actually a little bit different. Border layout has basically a couple of different defined areas, and when you go to add things to the frame, you tell it to which area it should be added. So when you go to add it, you actually want to pass a second parameter, which would be border layout dot, and then if you take a look, these are the ones at which you want to look. You have the we have line end, line start, page end, page start, and then there should be center. So the way that this works is you first have page start, which is at the very top. So that would be up here, you know, kind of like where the menu bar would be. Then you have line start, which would be over here on the left, center, which is in the dead center, and then you have line end, which would be over there. Then finally you have page end, which would be the bottom part, you know, around where the console and dock are. So let's say that we wanted to add this hello world label to page start, so it would show up at the very top, and then we want to add the click me button to line start. Then we want to add checkbox to, so we want to center that. Then we'll go ahead and add this to, border layout dot line end, and then finally border layout dot page end, and I'll just go ahead and comment out these other two or I guess 3. And now if we go ahead and take a look at it, let's see if it'll actually work how I think it will, or if nothing will show up. Alright, new border layout. Okay, so that certainly should work. Hang on one second, let me take a look. Alright, so I figured out the problem. Turns out that you actually need to set the layout, as far as the border layout, up at the top. So I'll go ahead and delete that from down there. But you just have to set up the layout before you start adding things to it. Now if I go ahead and run it, you'll notice that Hello World gets drawn at the page start, which is at the top. Then the Click Me button gets drawn at line start, which is over there. Check Me is in the center. Fill Me is over on the right, and then another one is down at the bottom. Now you'll notice that the layout is really weird, like this Click Me button is huge, you know, at the top and bottom, and this Check Me isn't actually centered. As I said, you know, especially with resizing it, it's a bit strange. As I said, it's not very common that you would, you know, use this layout manager, but, you know, it does exist, and I think that it is the default layout manager in some version of Java. I think they change it every so often. So that's the border layout. Let me go ahead and delete all of these because we're going to go try another layout. The next layout that we're going to try is the box layout. And now this is personally my favorite one because it's like, you know, it's very versatile. And that's the one that I was actually using in the previous example. So when you go ahead and instantiate a box layout, box layout will take 2 different parameters. The first one is the container. So when I do frame.setLayout, I have to give it the frame. But there's one strange thing about the box layout, which I'll show you in 1 second. Then you also need to pass it. You can choose which axis you want to use. And now I would recommend using either X or Y. You would use X if you want it to go left to right. You know, that would be similar to the flow layout. And use Y axis if you want it to go from top to bottom. Now if you go ahead and run this, you'll notice that we will get an error and it won't work. About this box layout can't be shared, which is obviously very confusing. But when you're working with a JFrame, you have to do frame.getContentPane. If you're working with a JPanel, you just put in the panel, but with the frame, you have to do frame.getContentPane. It's just a weird way that it works. I mean, it should automatically detect the content pane, but it doesn't. If we go ahead and run it now, you'll notice that it is now top to bottom. Now you'll notice that like the Hello World is not it's not centered, or nothing's centered here, but it's, you know, separate from the rest of these things, and then the rest of them are pretty big and they take up a lot of room. So when you work in the you know, GUI designing part, which we will do with some sample, you know, actually designing a GUI instead of just adding a bunch of components, you do have the ability to set the size of all the different components so you can move them as you wish. Let's see, the last component, I'll just quickly show you with the x-axis, and then I think that there's only one more that's worth showing right now. So as you can see, this looks pretty similar to the flow layout, except it's centered, and then these text fields are very tall. And looks like it's actually missing, oh no, there it is, that last text field there. So yeah, Swing is rather, you know, finicky in these kinds of ways, but when you actually try to make a GUI instead of just adding a bunch of components, you can figure out which layout is right for you, and then you can align the components so that they look good. And then one last thing I'm going to show you is the grid layout. And the grid layout is exactly what it sounds like. If you want to align things in a grid, and you would want to, you can specify in the grid layout, you could leave it blank, but you'd probably want to say the number of rows and the number of columns. So if we have, how many items? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think. Then we could do 3 rows of 3, and then there would be 1 extra little bit of room. You can also specify a vertical and horizontal gap, like the amount of space you want in between each component. And if you go ahead and run it now, you'll notice that everything is put kind of like a checkerboard, sort of, in a 3x3 pattern. So you'll see that we have this 3, 3, and then 2 because we don't have a third component there. And then you can't tell, maybe here's really where you can tell that there is a 10 pixel, or, you know, there's a little gap in between each of the different pieces. So it's very rare that I personally would ever use this, but it can certainly come in handy if you're trying to lay some stuff out like a checkerboard. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the grid layout. I guess I'll just leave the grid layout in the code that I post in the video, but I'll also add comments for all of the other layouts that we did. So we did the flow layout, the box layout, which would be frame.getContentPane, and box layout.x-axis, or of course y-axis. Or we also did, what was the last one? Oh yeah, border layout. And then for this you would use add component border layout dot constant, which would be you know, whatever the constant is, so center, page start, page end, line start, and line end. So that's all for this video. Just a couple of the different layouts available. There are some more layouts that are built in, but you know, I don't know if it's worth going over them right now because I've personally never used them, and I just wanted to show you guys some of the layouts, because when we start actually trying to design a GUI, the first thing that you would want to do pretty much is figure out which layout you're going to use, and then how you're going to work with that layout to align the components how you want. Now, layouts are optional. You could write a program that does not use a layout and you manually place every single component, but that is highly not recommended at all, because layouts just make everything so much easier. So as always, subscribe if you want to see more, comment what you want to learn. If you like this video, click the like button, and I'll see you guys soon with some more programming videos. Bye guys.